Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this blue-white tempo or prison deck that's trying to lock people out of the game with enchantments like High Noon, saying each player cannot cast more than one spell each turn. Very effective against certain strategies that rely on casting lots of cheap spells in the same turn, but also very effective if we pair it with some flash creatures, so we can still maybe cast one spell in our own turn and then one other spell in the opponent's turn. And a lot of our flash creatures also disrupt spells that are on the stack, such as the Aven Interrupter, which can plot a spell that's on the stack, and then plotted cards and cards in exile in general will cost 2 more mana to cast, which also synergizes with Aang Swift Savior, because if we airbend a spell that's on the stack, it also ends up in exile, where the Aven Interrupter will make it cost 2 more. So airbending normally lets you replay it for 2 mana. Now with Aven Interrupter, it's going to cost up to 4 mana, and of course the more interrupters, the better it gets. Then we also have the Sky Coach Conductor, which is a 2/3 with Flash, Flying, and Vigilance. And then it enters Prepared, giving us access to this 1 mana Flicker effect that can exile and return a non-pilot creature we control. So now for 1 mana, we can potentially re-enable the Interrupter's ability, or maybe Aang Swift Savior, so we can keep bouncing spells that the opponent tries to cast. And then especially if we have a High Noon in play, limiting how many spells the opponent can play, we can very quickly lock the opponent out. We also have a bunch of newcomers from Marvel Superheroes. At 2 mana, we're playing 1 Jennifer Walters to complement the 4 copies of Voice of Victory, preventing the opponent from casting spells during our turn, because one way, of course, the opponent could circumvent the effectiveness of High Noon is by casting an instant in our turn and then another spell in their own turn. So now with Jennifer or Voice of Victory, we can prevent that from happening. And these creatures that transform, such as Jennifer Walters, are also quite synergistic with our own airbending mechanic, since we could decide to airbend Jennifer Walters using Aang or using Avatar's Wrath, which airbends all creatures except one, and then we get to replay the transformed side as opposed to the cheaper one, so then we can get the sensational She-Hulk in play. Or with King T'Challa, we could play the Black Panther as normally a 6 mana 3/3 with Flash and Double Strike, preventing all damage that would be dealt to it. And when it deals damage to a player, we also get to draw a card, so can potentially draw 2 cards with Double Strike. Otherwise, King T'Challa still a reasonable 3 mana 3/2 with Flash, saying whenever a player draws their second card each turn, we get to draw a card as well, so it can punish opposing card draw spells. And then we've got a few more interactive 2-drops with a Floodpit's Drowner, stunning an opposing creature. Also a good one to flicker with a Conductor to re-enable it. The new Wondrous Wasp is also very good against creature strategies as a 2 mana 2/1 with Flash and Flying. And then when it enters, we get to tap up to 1 target creature, and it loses all abilities for as long as we control the Wondrous Wasp. And then a 1-off Malcolm, which when it hits the opponent can help us draw and discard to improve our hand. And of course another creature with Flash to optimally synergize with our High Noon. We also have some cheaper removal spells with 2 copies of Erode to hit creatures and planeswalkers. The opponent will get a basic land in return. Sometimes we actually want to erode our own creature if we want to get an extra basic land, especially with 1/1 tokens from Voice of Victory, which would get sacrificed anyway. So that's another cute interaction to keep in mind. And then Seamrip gives us another cheap answer to deal with opposing 1 and 2 drops that the opponent might have snuck into play before we managed to keep up our various counter spells. And then to help out against the graveyard decks, I am also playing 1 Kutzil's Flanker, another flash creature with a bunch of useful abilities, but we're mostly interested in exiling target player's graveyard, and if we don't have a graveyard to exile, we can just gain 2 life and scry 2. And then topping off our curve, 2 copies of Enduring Curiosity, another powerful flash creature that plays very well with the Voice of Victory, since those tokens will also draw us an extra card if they hit the opponent. And then 2 copies of Avatar's Wrath, which also has good synergy with the airbending mechanic and the double-faced creatures, as well as just giving us a way to maybe catch back up if we do indeed fall behind early on. Then Avatar's Wrath, especially paired with High Noon or with Aven Interrupter, can be a nightmare for the opponent to deal with, because the Interrupter will make those cards more expensive, and with High Noon, our opponent's not going to be able to redeploy their exiled cards very quickly. And then our mana base also picked up one Gleaming Bastion as another dual land. Does require a basic to be at its best, so we have 4 of each, which can also help enable the Abandoned Air Temple to enter untapped, and this is also a good mana sink to pump up our creatures, since we're often trying to end the game with our flyers, so we can hopefully get the game over with before the opponent manages to finally deploy their spells. And then Starting Town is actually pretty important to fix for blue and white, as well as for red mana, so we can occasionally sacrifice a High Noon to deal 5 damage to get the game over with, and Multiversal Passage can do the same. And then we also have a one-off Restral's Anchorage as another creature land that can help fly over for the win, otherwise a bunch of these other blue-white dual lands. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a reasonable hand, missing some creature removal perhaps. And we're starting off behind against an aggressive deck, which is not where you want to be. Yeah, this deck struggles when it falls behind quickly, but luckily they did not have a 2-mana play. And now Serac. Also uncounterable, although of course Interrupter could still hit it. So, pass a turn. Could have gone for planes, I suppose, if we're planning to Interrupter. Might end up playing the Sky Coach instead. So this is their only play for the turn. So yeah, I'll just go for the Sky Coach instead. Can ambush the Recruit now. So that works out. Okay, and now Enduring Curiosity can also trade for Serac. Won't be able to interrupt her and all aboard in the opponent's turn, because we're also limited to 1 spell per turn, of course. But yeah, I'm happy if we can trade the Curiosity for Serac, and then we'll have the enchantment to hopefully draw more. Alright, Gearhulk. Probably worth interrupting. Serac draws. And a double block doesn't seem great, so I'll just take it. And then I can main phase the Curiosity, and then still keep all aboard available in the opponent's turn. So this is where we can start taking over, leveraging our High Noon. And Avatar's Wrath could be very nice too. On the board I'm happy to trade Enduring Curiosity, so they have to make a move. They could also activate the Temple, but I would still trade. So they play Gearhulk as their only spell. I get to all aboard on the Interrupter to once again counter it. Even though Serac draws. If they have some instants that they can cast in my turn, they can still maybe break serve. But that's where having the Voice of Victory, of course, would also be helpful. So happy with a trade. Is there a reason for me to double block to prevent 1 trample? Yeah, maybe that's worth it. Opponent still trades for Curiosity. Alright, so I can attack, draw 2. Maybe main phase Conductor in my turn, so I have the Adventure available in the opponent's again. Also, can't forget about sacrificing High Noon for 5 damage. So that's maybe a consideration next turn. So play Conductor. And then pass the turn. So yeah, this is really the deck firing on all cylinders. With Interrupter, the High Noon, the Conductors. And there's not a whole lot our opponent can do about it once it gets to this stage. And now we just attack, sack High Noon, and that's game. And yeah, opponent scoops it up. Could even play Jennifer Walters first on the very slim chance that our opponent has some instant speed life gain, so that our opponent cannot cast spells in my turn, and then we still have just 5 mana to sack the High Noon to take them out. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with High Noon. No counter spells. Got Malcolm to maybe find them. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Also still need a basic to enable the Bastion, but I can cast a bunch of spells in the meantime. Okay, so maybe start with Malcolm and then next turn High Noon. Opponent a red-white, make that Jeskai. So some sort of control deck. Yeah, I mean if they tap out to answer Malcolm, then High Noon resolves. Interruptor is very nice, Drowner's not that important. So then, I think this turn cycle I still pass with mana up, maybe planning end of turn Conductor. And then I can High Noon keep up the prepared adventure. Okay, Tablet. Good card. So if I interrupt it, I could go Conductor activate on Interrupter again next turn. Yeah, that seems fine. Another Interruptor is good too. So this is where we try to tempo them out. So just gonna pass with Conductor. Day of Judgment. So then I can just play another Interrupter, although it's more efficient to go Conductor and then Flicker on the Interrupter. And then there's no window for them to ever cast a Tablet here. Okay, so now we're hitting for 6. I do want to resolve another Interrupter to make their plotted spells cost 2 more. A land here for High Noon could have been great, but now we're mana short. So, gonna pass a turn. Yeah, but they can cast Day of Judgment with counterspell backup. Things might get ugly. So they have 3 mana left. If I just cast an Interrupter and it resolves, we're good. And that seems safer than going for Conductor, try and Flicker in case I have spot removal for Interrupter. But a counterspell would be bad. Okay, that works. So now Tablet costs 4, so they can't even play that. And our opponent scoops it up, so yeah, quick win here against Jeskai Control. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have what looks like a keepable hand. Got some creature interaction, and then multiple powerful flash creatures, including the new King T'Challa. So if our opponent's drawing cards, we maybe get to benefit from it. Let's see what we're up against. Starting town, so can't quite tell. It's a green deck with a Spider Manifestation. Good one to lock down with a Drowner, maybe in their upkeep. If they want to trade for Malcolm, that's fine. So King T'Challa is not going to be at its best in this matchup. I doubt our opponent's drawing much. Although same can be said for Jennifer Walters, we're not really stopping many instants in our turn. So yeah, this turn, drown the manifestation in the opponent's upkeep, so it's locked down for 2 turns. The Wrath is going to be great. Conductor, Flicker, Drowner is going to be a play. So yeah, it's between the newcomers here. Guess we'll keep King T'Challa. Let our opponent untap, and then now drown the manifestation so they can't ramp with it. And then we will rely on our flyers to apply some pressure here. Eventually the Wrath can send the opponent's permanents packing, while we hopefully get the last points of damage in. Alright, Sheltered by Ghosts still works. Exiles the Drowner. Makes our Wrath better later. And a High Noon. Not the best turn for High Noon, but let's see what we draw off Malcolm. Should have waited to play a land in case we draw a better utility land. But yeah, I'll ditch the islands. We are getting closer to playing free spells with Malcolm as well. So that's also worth keeping in mind. So this turn probably go for Conductor or King T'Challa. Opponent's got the Badger Mole. So they can play another 2-drop. And a Conductor can at least fly over. Although there is something to be said for playing King T'Challa, so we airbend it with a Wrath and can play the transformed side later. But yeah, this might be a good turn for High Noon and then play King T'Challa in the opponent's turn. So the manifestation is finally untapped. We'll see if they keep it back to block or not. They can only cast one spell, so they might go for something impactful like an Ouroboros or a Nature's Rhythm. Yep, a Rhythm for 2. Surprised they didn't do it for more. So Spider untaps. And gets another cub. So they can't cast anything else here. And now the Wrath is looking good. Play King T'Challa. And Aang is a decent pickup. So I could also play Aang, airbend the Spider manifestation, paying the ward. Although I guess because of High Noon I'm not going to be able to then play a free Wrath with Malcolm. So in that case, do I attack first? I think I do. What are the odds that our opponent actually trades here? Seems pretty low. Alright, they actually do trade for Malcolm, maybe afraid of the 4th counter. So then we get the Drowner back. I mean, I don't even have to Wrath necessarily. Get to lock down their forests. Starting town might have been better if we want to cut off a second color. And then I can still airbend, and then all aboard in the opponent's turn to flicker something again. Or I can just all aboard now on the Drowner, lock down the other land, and have Aang available in the opponent's. That might be better. And then I could still make the play of airbending my own King T'Challa, so we can play Black Panther. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Alright, opponent's just gonna scoop it up. We set them back too much on tempo. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a functional hand. Voice into Aven Interrupter can be pretty annoying for some decks to deal with. Conductor to maybe keep flickering it. Let's see what we're up against. Blue-white, so should be a good matchup for Voice of Victory at least. And a High Noon's not bad either. So let's see which variety of blue-white they are. The artifact deck. So voice not as amazing, but still prevents them from playing the saw blades in my turn. So yeah, I mean, if this hand can find a couple more lanes, we've got Interrupter and then Conductor, keep flickering this, maybe get a High Noon involved as well. We can get the game over with pretty quickly. If they don't force me to use Interrupter, we still get the Conductor in play. But yeah, they've got some impactful 3-drops. And 4-drops, if you count the Battlefront. So a lot of cards for us to counter. Repurposing Bay can sack the bricks next turn to get something scary. And that's something I wouldn't really be able to counter. So I think it's still worth interrupting, but I'm sure our opponent's got some other juicy cards in hand. Now Aang at least gives us another way to airbend in case they go for their United Battlefront. And then Aang plus Interrupter is also very synergistic, since it'll make those airbended cards cost 4 as opposed to 2. Synthesizer is actually beatable since it doesn't do anything in and of itself. So we can just counter whatever expensive artifacts our opponent plays next. So this is the perfect window to get a Conductor involved. And another one. A land would have been better, but I think we're still in great shape. Opponent's at 7. And this is not the type of deck that's gonna chain together multiple cheap spells. Which is where, of course, High Noon could maybe stop that. It's another Synthesizer. Again, wouldn't be a disaster, but we can just airbend it and that's game over. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Still need a second white source for Aven Interrupter, but I think we've got a keeper. Malcolm can also maybe improve our hand. I see a Might deck. So kind of a more aggressive deck full of pump spells. So High Noon will limit how many spells they can cast in one turn. For now, Talents. The Might's not too scary by itself. Starts becoming scary once it's joined by a few friends. So High Noon is certainly a consideration. Or we can go for Malcolm. I did find my second white in the meantime. So I'm actually not hating the High Noon. Not too worried about needing Voice of Victory. Also wouldn't block the Might since they can pump it up. So now they can only play one spell per turn. Summon Fenrir's a decent one. But yeah, at some point Aang can maybe airbend the Might. But yeah, I'm gonna take a hit this turn, presumably. Opponent levels up the talent. So if I wanna use Swift Savior, I have to go for it now, and I think it may be worth it. Even though our opponents would then maybe get to resolve something scary, like an Ouroboros if they're running that. But if this resolves, the Might can potentially receive 2 additional counters if they level this up again. And then with 5 power, this hits for 8, so we're almost dead. They could also have some hexproof trick in hand. Okay. So Talent now resolves. They can cast 1 spell. And it's a Recruit with Offspring. Yeah, I mean, the Talent is a good mana sink when you cannot cast multiple spells because of High Noon. So we're still up against it here. Conductor was a decent pickup. So now I could main phase a Conductor and then use All Aboard in the opponent's turn. Although I'm not going to be able to airbend any of the opponent's creatures that have counters on them, because they have ward. Aang does not airbend enchantments. I'm actually happy they're going for the might. So then we want to airbend it while it's on the stack so they don't get the extra recruit triggers. Opponent levels up the talents, double the number of counters. So yeah, we may need something like an Avatar's Wrath to get back into it. Opponent decides not to attack. So I can hit for 4, and then this might be a Malcolm plus Interrupter situation. Yeah, transforming Aang could also be part of our plan. So I could main phase Malcolm, keep up Interrupter. Or Voice of Victory if we plan to transform Aang can represent more damage. And then I'm shields down on Interrupter, so then Malcolm's the only play I have. So this is 8 mana to Waterbend. So then, assuming I draw another land, I go up to 6, can tap Conductor and Malcolm, so Voice and Aang can attack. Opponent's still at 14. So then put a +1 counter on each tapped creature you control. So the Voice would hit for 6, Aang would hit for 6, so that's still only 12. So I'm probably just gonna Malcolm keep up Interrupter. Also can't forget about High Noon to deal 5 damage. So maybe that's our avenue to victory. Okay, Ouroboros, I'm happy to interrupt. So yeah, things are falling into place. Opponent passes. So we've got 8 in play. High Noon is another 4, so we're getting very close to lethal here. But yeah, let's attack, see what happens. Malcolm finds a Plains, which seems more useful than a Voice of Victory. So then I can play the Voice and still keep up another Interrupter. And then I just need to survive 1 attack from our opponents. And then High Noon can do the honors. Ouroboros back. Interrupter says no. And our opponent scoops it up. They would get 2 more counters, so I would be forced to chump with at least a Voice of Victory. But then we should not have any trouble crossing the finish line. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a functional hand. Facing black-green. Turn 1. Play Verge. Next turn, probably Voice. So it's kind of a mid-range deck. Alright, could be a tougher matchup. Certainly expecting some removal. Yeah, requiring Hex. Plays Dread Knight. Reasonable target for Seam Rip, so I could now Seam Rip plus High Noon. Make sure to Seam Rip first, otherwise we can't cast our second spell. And then next turn the Curiosity's looking good. Opponent's gonna miss with their Duress. And that's the only spell they're casting here. So this turn Curiosity, next turn we can maybe play Jennifer in our turn, Sky Coach in the opponent's. Cease can be a way to exile a Curiosity while it's temporarily in the graveyard, but doesn't work with a High Noon out when you cannot double spell. There's not too many instant speed removal spells that exile creatures that I can think of, since of course that would be the best answer to Enduring Curiosity. Possible they run out of Planeswalker. This only draws if it deals damage to a player, But of course they could just have a normal instant speed removal spell, take out Curiosity, and then we don't have a creature to really benefit from the enchantment. But yeah, our opponent's having to think long and hard about this. Or they've already disconnected since they don't enjoy the matchup. Yeah, this blue-white prison deck tends to rub people the wrong way sometimes. Okay, so Curiosity attacks. Interruptor's excellent. So yeah, we should have this on lock now. Play Jennifer, pass. Can either play Conductor or Interrupter if we need to counter anything. And then Conductor can flicker Interrupter, so that buys us 2 more turns where we're attacking and drawing extra cards. So yeah, things did not line up for our opponents. Alright, and that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a hand that's hopefully going to improve with a draw discard from Malcolm, but it's not bad enough to mulligan. Let's see what we're up against. A green deck with turn 1 elves. Green-white could be the various landfall decks, or maybe one of those practiced offense aggro decks. It looks like the practiced offense variety. So yeah, Serac is pretty good against us, cannot be countered. If we target their stuff, they get to draw. But let's see what Malcolm has to offer. So might actually want to keep starting town if we ever want to sacrifice the High Noon. And then for now keep up Aang. Probably should have played the starting town, actually. Serac attacks, as does the elf. So then I don't hate Aang, airbend Serac, try and ambush the elves. That worked. And Badger Mole will resolve. And Serac is back. Erode's a decent pickup. Alright, so could still play High Noon, play Starting Town, keep up Erode. And then what to erode is the question. Might be Serac. If they play Ouroboros, we can erode that instead. It's going to be an Elspeth, wow. Well, erode luckily hits Planeswalkers as well. But yeah, Elspeth is quite powerful. It's going to go for the flying ability. Okay, so we'll see if they attack. Serac does. They're not taking the Air Temple into account, so now I could actually erode Serac and then just Air Temple to finish off Elspeth. I think I prefer that. Now Malcolm doesn't get to draw, I believe. It's only when it hits players. Can also start considering a transformation on Aang. Opponent does have a Seam Rip. Probably goes for High Noon. Yep. Would have been able to maybe sacrifice it next turn otherwise. So we were close to lethal. But now a Gearhulk is likely to dominate the game. Can get all sorts of 1-drops, including fight spells and author removal. And goes for Resolve and a Recruit. And they get to fight. At least we've got a replacement Aang. And they still have enough mana for a Recruit. So yeah, the High Noon was holding the opponent back, as we can see. And Badger Mole attacks. Opponent is ahead in the race now. So we'll need some help off the top. Still attacking with Malcolm. And then I'm potentially airbending the Gear Hulk, although if our opponent replays it, they get more 1-drops. King T'Challa is decent, although I don't know if it's going to be good enough. Can also cast it for 6 mana. Yeah, that might be the move. Can keep our options open. Gear Hulk says, with a resolve, cannot be blocked by more than 1 creature. Ouroboros a problem. Yeah, Ouroboros gonna make it so that I'm not gonna get to eat a Gear Hulk with Black Panther, but maybe it's still the play just to get it out there and can eat Badger Mole or Recruit. Yeah, we are not gonna have lethal in the air if I go for Aang and put counters on stuff. Opponent could also have their own Erode. So yeah, a little bit short of eating the Gear Hulk. So then I think we're better off eating the Badger Mole. Still taking 11. And then, yeah, if I top deck something like an Erode for Ouroboros, I could still maybe have lethal. Although looks like they might have something else second main. Wow, opponent explodes. That seems premature, since they were not necessarily dead on board. But yeah, I guess their opponent did not want to live in a world where Black Panther ambushes Badger Mole Cub. Because yeah, next turn I could either airbend Ouroboros, and then we get to attack for 9 damage and draw 2 cards, which is decent, but then we still need to find a solution to the other stuff in play. Or I can activate Air Temple, which certainly forces Ouroboros to chump Black Panther, but then, yeah, we're still not out of the woods. So, yeah, strange concession, but I'm not going to complain. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand's fine, but of course on the draw we might fall behind before we can lock them out. Voice of Victory could be nice against a blue deck. So this might be a Doomsday combo deck. So yeah, if they're holding on to Requiting Hex, they won't be able to cast it until their turn, thanks to the Voice's ability. So what are they gonna tap out for? This is certainly the matchup where Voice of Victory and Jennifer Walters are gonna be at their best. Opponent just taps out for a stock up. Okay, so then now we get to attack and then pass with Interrupter, turn after Curiosity. And a High Noon could maybe complete things. But yeah, for now it's going to be Aven Interrupter. Unless I want to erode my own token and play High Noon, which is an option, just so I get to maybe ramp. Although it's not like the extra mana really matters. And yeah, the Voice is also perfect with Enduring Curiosity, potentially drawing 3 cards. Now they could have multiple cheap removal spells for Voice of Victory, and then the Interrupter's maybe gonna fall short. But would love for them to tap out for something expensive. Duress, I can let resolve. Probably takes the High Noon. Now of course they know what they have to play around. And High Noon is indeed taken away. If they don't put anything on the stack, I can still go for a Conductor. Requiting Hex. Try to Interrupter that. So they can't cast it right now, and they can't cast it in my turn because of Voice either. So this is the perfect window for Curiosity, attack, and draw 4 cards. So even if they have a sweeper, they won't be able to collect evidence to exile the Curiosity. But now they do get to have a turn where they can maybe do whatever they want. Our hand is decent, although I would have liked to see an extra land. Opponent's gonna replay the Hex for 2 mana. Not a bargain. Alright, there's my land. So I'd be very surprised if we still somehow lose this one. So what's the best play available? Well, I guess our opponent conceding is a pretty good play on their part. But yeah, this turn would probably involve Voice of Victory and then keeping up a 3 mana instant speed play. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. High Noon into basically all our signature 3 mana creatures. Now let's see what we're up against. Another starting town. ×2. And a Soulstone. Alright, so not entirely sure what to make of this yet. Maybe a 4-color control deck. Stock up. Good opportunity to either airbend or use the Interrupter. Yeah, maybe airbend this one. And then I can Seam Rip the Soulstone, still keep up our 3 mana plays. And then next up we want Interrupter, and then maybe main phase Conductor, so I can all aboard in the opponent's turn. So Stock Up is back. That's their only play for the turn. So don't have to interrupt it, can just go for Conductor. Sure. Opponent maybe shocking themselves to play around one of those conditional counter spells, unless they pay 2 mana. Would still make sense. Alright, Wondrous Wasp, so we'll hit for 4. Now they can still cast an instant in my turn, I suppose. So maybe that's what they're keeping up. And a Braid. So I could all aboard, and then of course just Flicker Ang to save it, or we can interrupt. And then still have all aboard. It's a bit more aggressive. And gets our damage in right away. But yeah, having a cheap instant in circulation without me having the Voice of Victory effect does give them a few more tools to maybe get back into it. Avengers Disassembled. So yeah, that's the only spell they're casting. So I get to flicker the Interrupter. So we'll attack. So what's next? Probably just pass. And then play the Wasp end of turn, most likely. So they get to disassemble. That will resolve this time. They don't get to play any other spells. So I could erode my own creatures, so I have enough mana to activate my High Noon next turn to burn them out. But I'm also pretty likely to just draw a land naturally. Can play the Wasp in the meantime. But if I draw land, they're still dead. So we'll hit for 2 first, just in case. But then sacking High Noon should do it. Yeah, showing the importance of starting town, allowing the red activation. Awesome. So yeah, we got to see this blue-white tempo deck in action, sometimes described as a prison deck for good reason, because yeah, the combination of High Noon with counter spells like Aven Interrupter and Flicker effects to essentially re-enable it are very tough for a lot of decks to handle. So the main weakness of this archetype is falling behind early on, although a card like High Noon also makes it harder for opponents to deploy multiple cheap cards at once. So it's really, if you're on the draw and the opponent is off to a particularly quick start, this deck will struggle. Otherwise, it feels like it's got game against pretty much any deck if we have a functional draw. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, Have a nice day.